I probably know what's gonna happen next, and I don't like it.
Do not war!
Hello friends, and welcome back to ReddX, your source for the freshest daily Reddit content anywhere on the internet. Promise swearsies it's just a fact, and it's totally science. Go ahead and look it up. Today we're jumping into r/Tales of Neckbeards. Yes, indeed, we had the beard of 1,000 irritations, a couple parts of that saga, maybe a week ago or so, and so we're going to continue that. I've been promised that things will only devolve even more, which I am looking forward to. If you missed the first part, that of course is linked in the description, as long as I remember to do it. I've been pretty good about it, but sometimes I do forget. Anyways, we're going to jump into it. Just one part today, but it is super long, so we'll see how it goes. Let's get some plugs and disclaimers out of the way, and then we will jump right into some neckbeard cringe. The beard of 1,000 irritations. The beard who couldn't. Aw, the little engine who couldn't. Hi everyone, and welcome to part 3. In the last part of this story, I posted about how the biggest neckbeard in my life, the beard of 1,000 irritations, or TBOATI for short, did more somersaults than a Cirque du Soleil trainee to get out of doing me a favor. He's a sci-fi fan, working on his own original world, and has been hiring me, a writing coach, to help him with his world building development. I'm letting off steam by writing about this because he really does have a knack for annoying me in 1,000 different little ways. Death by 1,000 cuts. I've changed a few details to protect both the innocent and the bearded. In case you missed part 1 or 2, here's our cast list and a quick trigger warning. I like how you kept innocent and bearded separate. They are not the same. Trigger warning for rape and prostitution. Me, that's OP. A 30-something from Wales with an online writer coach business. The beard of 1,000 irritations, TBOATI, a customer of mine from mainland Europe. I've seen precisely one photo of him. He's very overweight, perhaps even on the cusp of medical obesity. I have no idea whether he smells or what his self-care regime is, but oh boy, he's got some nice guy / neckbeardy vibes. He does have a girlfriend though, and I still feel sorry for her. Emily, TBOATI's girlfriend, artist for his world, devout Christian, lives in the deep south of the US, reluctant to talk to anybody that she doesn't actually know online, has never responded to me with more than a sentence or two, if she answers at all. That long-distance relationship, boy. Jay is TBOATI's co-writer. TBOATI considers himself all but dependent on this guy to write the creative material for this project. Jay talks to me about as much as TBOATI's girlfriend does, which is to say, not very much at all. Despite my efforts to communicate with him as part of TBOATI's overall project. This beard's productivity record is odd, to say the least. He writes a lot of notes about his sci-fi world, but posts almost nothing for it online. His girlfriend is an artist, but I could only point you towards a single piece that she's actually drawn for him. He's commissioned a handful of artworks from other artists, which admittedly he has posted, and he commissioned me to help write a backstory for the main character of the story based in his world. He also had me help him with the beginning of a very long story that takes place in his world, which was written by him and Jay. He doesn't independently produce any content for his universe whatsoever. Any art or writing for his world has been done with or by someone else. I'd love to tell you that he's a good project manager, but that would be a lie. That's right, why do it when you could get somebody else to do it? And then there's Jay. For a long time, Jay was a mysterious figure to me. TBOATI mentioned him all the time, and from the way he wrote about him, you'd think he had tears in his eyes as he typed. Jay was a writer who TBOATI had met before I'd found him, and was apparently the writer for the above-mentioned story. I was always curious why there were no stories for TBOATI's world posted up anywhere, but TBOATI's answer was always some variation of,
Well, we're just not ready to post anything yet.
TBOATI only ever described Jay as this savior-like figure who was going to make his world a reality, and how they were
Brothers.
No, they were not biological or adoptive brothers. I don't know, I got a couple like online brothers, just a brother from another mother, right? While I wouldn't expect TBOATI to gossip about Jay, and I didn't fish for information, it always struck me how he entirely framed Jay as some savior-like figure who would make his world a success single-handedly, and basically referred to him as nothing else. He is Jay died for our sins. If Jay was as dedicated to writing this project as TBOATI claimed, then surely the situation would have looked different. I wondered if Jay was timid like TBOATI was, and I hit him up myself to say hi. Jay had almost nothing to say to me. He was immensely reserved and quite polite, but aside from reaching out to me once to ask me how to get customers for story commissions, he had very little to say to me. He's trying to poach your customers, bro. One day, TBOATI told me he needed to chat and that it was urgent. I was already used to him having the occasional crisis that
He had to talk with me about.
for whatever reason, I listened to this one. It turned out that he was
Tense.
because Jay had found a job that, along with his college commitments, would take up most of his time, so he wouldn't be able to prioritize TBOATI's sci-fi project anymore. I don't have the conversation for this anymore on Telegram, but he hoped that Jay would refuse the job or fail the interview. Jesus. I pointed out that Jay had a right to seek his fortune in the world. TBOATI admitted that that was true, but
He still didn't like it.
what an asshole. Write my sci-fi world for me. Do it underpaid and don't pursue anything else. Bro, are you on crack? TBOATI did present me with a story once, the one I mentioned above. It was joint written by Jay and himself, and the writing was okay, but bland. It focused a lot on a very ordinary morning for the main character, and went on for thousands of words about his commute to work. I think that's more than bland, my dude. That's like some kind of psychological torture. It somewhat showcased the world building of the world the character lived in, but the same could have been done with much fewer words. The dialogue was stiff, and I would have pointed this out if TBOATI's natural conversational style wasn't equally stilted. I didn't think that was something that he would know how to fix, so I left it unmentioned and figured that he'd just grow into writing better dialogue as he grew as a person. No, I think you gotta tell him or he's not gonna be aware of it, you know? He's just gonna continue writing like he writes to people on Telegram. Stilted, awkward, horrible. But I don't know, I ain't no writing coach. A quick note about TBOATI's conversational style. If he talked about anything technical, then he would phrase things awkwardly and stiffly and use jargon, or failing that, just the biggest words that he could find. He did this when I interviewed him about his college work, see part 2 of this series, and when I tried talking to him about the ins and outs of his sci-fi project. He spent months talking about
An exordium.
for his sci-fi world. For those who can't be bothered to look it up, that's me. It just means a collection of short stories introducing a fictional setting. But hey, calling that
An exordium.
made TBOATI feel important, so who am I to judge? It is a really awesome word, though. I'm gonna add that one to my vocabulary. Not that I write many short stories. Never mind. Aside from this bland and stilted style, TBOATI was hung up on very specific, formulaic changes to his work. If I said I thought he'd phrase something awkwardly, he'd just get stuck until I suggested an alternative, and then he would use my exact suggestion. Anyone might do that from time to time, but he seemed downright afraid of flexing his creative muscles to the point that he wouldn't even try, especially after he'd heard, "I don't think this works," one time. He was also keen to know the
Right length for a chapter to be.
And I recommended around 3,000 words, if possible. I regretted recommending a number soon after because if he stuck to that number, then this story would have to be truncated in an awkward place. He just didn't have an intuitive idea of give readers enough to get their teeth into without fatiguing them, but listen to the flow of storytelling and see if it works to break it up there. And he just tried to slavishly stick to 3,000 words. When I tried explaining that my advice was merely a guide and he should do what felt right, he seemed utterly lost. That was over a year ago, and I haven't seen him write any stories since. This is all very strange, man. Maybe he has some sort of like developmental disability. Maybe I shouldn't be laughing at this too hard. For a while, TBOATI talked outside of consultation time about making his work grim-dark. I wasn't sure how dark he wanted it to be since he seemed pretty sheltered, but since it was his creative vision, I left him define his own level on that. Then one day he showed me a short scene that showcased the kind of grim-dark that he wanted, written by Jay about the elf people. Reader, let me explain about the elf people. TBOATI's sci-fi world had a few unique species. One of them was a race that was humanoid, but a bit smaller than humans, cute, often naive, and generally submissive. The way TBOATI described them was basically anime people. Oh god. That's good cringe. Who lived alongside the main race, which were essentially humans. We talked about them a little, but he'd never had much detail to give me. Not even any sketches. The scene was set in the lust super state of his sci-fi world. I do not like where this is going. Can I just interject and say, I probably know what's gonna happen next, and I don't like it. In this scene, a POV character walked through a red light district where elf people had been trafficked in from their native country and the slummier areas of the state to be used as prostitutes. The character saw sex acts happening between humans and elf people and remarked to himself,
How good it must have been for them to have healing sex after all the rape they must have been through.
God, dude. What is going on? I don't even want to touch that. I'm not going there. TBOATI was thrilled with the work and wanted to know my thoughts. I told him what I thought, that it was an appalling misrepresentation of sex work. TBOATI tried to explain to me that,
as he understood it, sex with somebody who'd been brutally raped would be good for them. A way to rebuild trust and let them relearn how to express their sexuality in a healthy way.
I don't know about that. I never considered it, but that don't sound right to me. Reader, you already know that I tolerate a lot from my clients, but portraying abuse in a positive light is where I draw the line. I told TBOATI that I found rape apologetics unacceptable, and that if he ever posted anything of this ilk, I would stop working with him and publicly state that I had done so as a damage limitation measure. I would not let something like an association with this kind of work tarnish my hard-earned reputation. He panicked and promised
He wouldn't post anything like this up.
He seemed terrified of my disapproval, not of destroying his own reputation, and he didn't seem to realize the seriousness of what he had suggested. He tried to explain to me that the elf people had
urges,
and that it was important that they were
allowed to satisfy them.
Dude. Of course they do. Those poor little real-life anime characters just trying to satisfy their urges. He also asked,
what about the liberty of people who want sex? Don't they get to satisfy their urges too?
I pointed out that it was hardly liberty for anyone to be forced into prostitution, which he conceded was true, but I was not and am not convinced that he really understood. I definitely agree with you there. This guy's completely checked out. I should say at this point that he had known that I'm female since the beginning of our working relationship, I used my name, which is traditionally feminine, to sign off emails. Why he thought he could sell the idea of rape to a woman? I have no idea. I had presumed OP was a male, for the record. I guess we yet again learn not to assume anything in this old world. Not that it makes a difference. I just thought that was a bit of a surprise. To this day, he routinely gets other people to do his creative work for him, but still somehow rarely ends up with anything finished, let alone publicly posted. We had an hour of discussion once that I offered to most of my clients for the purpose of planning his project for his world, mostly the meta stuff, audience development, goal setting, that kind of thing. One of the things that I do during this service is write down a list of actionable points, which includes a note on how we'll know when the task is done, and who is responsible for doing the task. Reader, he assigned responsibility for every one of his actionable points to somebody else. At least he's consistent. When there were 4 or 5, I noticed the pattern and asked him what he would be doing to contribute to his project. He said,
I don't want to be a slouch. I'll direct the project.
How do you direct with no direction? That don't make no sense. Then there was the episode with the map tutorial. TBOATI had no map for his own world. One day I found a great map tutorial. I followed it to make one for a project of my own, and then I presented it to him. He thought it looked awesome, and I admit that I was pleased with it too. I was proud of my map, and I showed it to several people, including him, and thought he might like me to link him to the map so he could make one for his sci-fi world. Surely he would appreciate a guide to make a map for free, since money was still an issue for him. Nope. He was delighted with the tutorial link, but immediately said
he'd get Jay to make it.
It's right there in front of you, dude. Just do it. Follow the steps. I suggested that maybe he could make it himself, but he said
he couldn't because he'd never made a map before.
Hence, tutorial. Yeah, this guy is hopeless. I gave up at that point. Later, he showed me a screenshot of a very brief sketch he'd made on paper. You could barely see the pencil marks, but he wanted to know,
what do you think?
I didn't think anything yet because, well, have you heard the phrase licking a tree and expecting maple syrup? No, I haven't, but it is evocative. There just wasn't enough to comment on. I pointed out that he probably needed to do more before I could actually comment on it, and he got very sheepish and apologetic and sounded ashamed. I was careful to be as non-shaming about this as possible, but this was one time when I couldn't honestly say that I thought it was good. It was an outline of a hypothetical atlas, and even that is a generous description of what he'd made up until this point. It was basically some lines. You couldn't even tell which bits were land and which were ocean. Just shade in the water pots, okay? I didn't hear any more about it for a while, but a few weeks later he showed me a finished map. He was delighted to tell me that
Jay had made it for him.
Oh, good. I'm so glad you've done nothing for yourself. Before I go on, I'm going to say that I think TBOATI had some huge anxiety issues. I'm not a psychiatrist, but it's not hard to see that something was up. I'm sympathetic, I really am, but I'm also aware that he doesn't take responsibility for working on his issues. An art project like his sci-fi world should be the perfect ground for working out some of that stuff. A creative project that lets you take some small risks that don't ultimately affect anything. He's got a team of sorts, and he's made at least some kind of effort to make friends. The trouble was he didn't seem to realize that he needed to take more responsibility and listen to how he thought and talked, instead of just accepting whatever popped into his head or heart without question. We've all posted something online that people haven't liked. See all of my other videos. Yes, I feel you on that, OP. I don't want to be too self-aggrandizing. I like what I make, obviously. That's why I make it. But I can admit some of my hot takes are dumb. This is what you get for coming off the cuff. Anyways, it's not nice to get a backlash, but it's kind of a rite of passage for being online. Maybe more so for artists and writers. I would say, yeah, basically anybody in a creative pursuit. It's different for YouTubers because you have a lot of people that are like encouraging and posting nice comments and stuff like that. Whereas artists and writers, they have to like post their content and get the word out in order to get feedback. Whereas doing YouTube is like, yeah, that's the whole thing is posting content. If you're not posting content, then are you really a YouTuber? Anyways, I'm off on a fucking tangent. I still hope that one day TBOATI will get tired of his own whining and make a decision to grow up, but he doesn't sound fed up of himself quite yet, not even in the present day. I have one more thing to tell you about TBOATI, and then I'll wrap up this section. Not only did he try to get other people to do his creative work, not only did he refuse to teach himself new skills, but he often had a very specific end result in mind that he did not want to deviate from. Let me acknowledge that there's nothing wrong with having a specific goal. What I mean is that he did this in a way that stripped most of the joy out of his creativity and made working with him exceedingly difficult. I'll give you an example. I put the word out to my audience that I could help develop an alien's culture from Neolithic level onwards, and that this would be a great way of finding all the little details that can make your sci-fi species unique. He loved the idea and booked in to work with me, but he fought me every step of the way. Fantasy and sci-fi culture development is a long and deep process and very difficult to rush. So I understand any customer wanting to minimize how many hours they book me in to work with them on a project like this. I do, however, have many ways of doing just the core work while in session, while giving my customer a big bulk of the work to do on their own time since they don't have to pay too much. And Reader, I tried teaching him. I really did. But he squirmed and backpedaled and and hedged and sat on fences all the way through our sessions. I had to work very hard to get him to define anything specific about his Neolithics. He wanted anything to be possible in all areas of their lives. He's a kind master. Kinda dumb, but he's kind. His inability to make these decisions made it extremely difficult to tell how his species would develop. What? They just do everything. What do you want? By this time, I had an assistant working with me, and this assistant took him for one of his cultural development sessions. By this time, TBOATI had spent around 300 pounds on developing his species' cultures, and hadn't got anywhere near as far as I'd have hoped. Within the first few minutes, he posted a picture of the character in traditional garb, drawn by his girlfriend, and said,
This is what I want to end up with,
for my assistant to see. He hadn't even mentioned this picture to me, much less shown it. My assistant told me about it. He asked TBOATI whether he'd shown that picture to me to show what end result he'd been wanting all along, and TBOATI said,
We have creative differences.
Creative differences that I'll never address. You just brush those under the rug. What could possibly go wrong? Reader, I did not have creative differences with him. My goal is of a creative guide, and I specialize in presenting options, not shutting him down. If he'd shown me this end result, I would have recommended a different service altogether. Anyways, that pretty much sums up how TBOATI acted around creativity and productivity. I could tell more, but it would probably be too easy to identify him at that point. I'll write up another part tomorrow. TLDR. Man, this really is a fascinating case study. I really like these stories because it's a front row seat, you know, about the inner workings of a disturbed beard mind, you know? It shows off his anxiety and his inability to commit to anything and just his constant delegation and absolute refusal to make any decisions for himself. And that's probably one of the big reasons why he ends up like living at home. You can extrapolate what happens in this story to his entire life. You know what I mean? While I do find myself frustrated with this character, while I can acknowledge that he has some like horribly toxic viewpoints that you should probably never say in public, part of me also feels for him. You know what I mean? And that's what I like most in beard stories. I don't just want to like cringe and laugh at somebody who's socially awkward. I need a dash of humanity, and that's what really brings it home for me. He's extra human. He's super flawed. I was going to say superhuman, but that's not accurate. And these flaws, you know, really rub some people, like OP, the wrong way. But unfortunately, in this tragedy of errors, OP is bound to him because she's trying to make a living, you know? So it's definitely an unfortunate situation, but I thank you so much for sharing it with us. I will be continuing this saga. I don't know how long it's going to get. It has many parts, but we'll keep plugging away. I'll keep putting them links in the description, and I hope that you guys will enjoy it. If you did, I hope you'll like, comment, and or subscribe. That is massively appreciated. Maybe share the story around. Check out them links in the description. Amazon affiliate link, wifey's channel, Mr. and Mrs. ReddX, my personal subreddit, r/ReddXReads, Teespring if you're trying to rock the merch, yeah. We also got the social medias, Twitter, Discord, Facebook. Oh, and how could I almost forget my gorgeous, wonderful, beautiful, generous patrons. Yes, you're seeing some names on the screen right now, and I'd like to thank them all. But specifically, ZeroMMX, Lady Nix, Robert Waits, Pope Squid, Rebecca H, Cider Drinker, Tato Ferret, The Last Shinobi, Mark 211, Michael Undead, Aaron W, Mitch, John Hero, Candy Sora, Digian Z, Fire Drake, Little Lone Wolf, Lone Island, Shara, Marvin DeMoth, Miss Monday, Silent Revolver, JM Coon, Leon Embers, TSM Kirby, Redwind, Synaptic Boomstick, and Jerry. He sent me a message on Patreon. He told me it's okay to call him Jerry, like Kramer. Been watching too much Seinfeld lately, man. Hopefully this episode won't get demonetized. Sometimes it does happen, and when it does, it's really nice to be able to lean back on my patrons so I don't have to freak out like too much. You know, we do push the envelope around here. It's kind of an inevitability. So if anybody else could support with the Patreon or even just a PayPal donation, I mean, that's massively appreciated. I thank you very much in advance. But if you can't right now, don't sweat it too hard, friends. I just appreciate you coming on through, hanging out with me, and I hope that you come on back and hang out with me again tomorrow, because really, the views is how my beard is buttered. In order to make it on back, you're going to need to keep yourself safe out there. Wash your hands, super important. But also take some time out and do something that you enjoy today. Maybe watching another ReddX video, something like that. I definitely appreciate you guys. So always remember that you are loved, you are worthy, and you definitely deserve it. I will see you in the next one, friends. And until then, bye-bye.